day, the sooner the cooler it
I
gets.
believe.
Yes, and we're trying not to call it that. I'm trying to be
Yes,
more, a
I got
gentler
you.
word.
I got you. So that would be,
Temporary storage units, and I'm looking to see if we have the most recent draft for you. What draft number do you have on that?
huh,
0392 is a green sheet. This is the one that's revised in the back of the room.
Ah, okay. Thank you. And thank you, John, for sharing. The December 6th draft is the one for, and we've been calling it pods, but this is to regulate temporary storage units, commonly referred to as pods. The ordinance really does 2 or 3 things total. One is,
okay, this is it.
okay.
Sorry about
So if
that.
you look at the document, it's called revised, and it has a green sheet in front of it.
Yes,
That's the one we're going to be working off of today.
okay.
Okay, and I'll wake you up to the point that you want to bring up later on as to the street signs. The property maintenance code, let's go a little bit more basic. Some of you guys know this from way back when, but the property maintenance code was developed because people during development would want to apply things in the development standards ordinance, and then the development standards ordinance doesn't apply to like a single family unit going into a already existed platted subdivision. So Old 41 where you have Heitman subdivision, Shangri-La, almost everywhere, not in the planned developments, but in areas. So we wanted to have a code set up for how people are to maintain. So, and it's mostly things that are in the development standards ordinance, but some are, some aren't. So the ordinance changes are pretty much this. We changed section 2 to have a definition of landowner, because sometimes it's the property owner, and this is an issue with code enforcement, but sometimes it's going to be the tenant or the person who has apparent rights on that property. So we wanted to make it clear, you know, so we're not just going into enforcement craziness. Section 4, Section 4, starting on page 4, was the main purpose for this amendment round. And this amendment round deals with temporary storage units. And the language drafted was, I believe, from Miami Springs, or similar to Miami Springs. You have reviewed the language already. The one change that's in here is the change that you requested that I make to paragraph 5. The concern that the LPA had at your last meeting was that Section 5 allowed code enforcement to go in at any time during reasonable hours. So what I did is I looked around. I felt it's not exactly the same relationship, but it's as close as I could, a landlord-tenant relationship of when landlords can be coming in. So this is basically taken from Florida Statute Chapter 83, from when landowners are allowed to come in. Upon reasonable notice, landowners shall not unreasonably withhold consent to the city to inspect the contents at a reasonable time to ensure that it's not being used to store said materials. Reasonable notice for the purpose of inspection is notice given at least 12 hours prior to entry, and reasonable time for purpose of inspection shall be between the hours of 7:30 and 6 p.m. And that's straight from a statute. I'm changing landowner to, city to landlord, and tenant to landowner are the 2 changes. Now, the other change that is big on this one, and we will be making the change to the development standards ordinance at the next go-around, is street lights. Street lights is another statutory creature that has a special meaning. It doesn't just mean every light that's up in the air. Street lights in this circumstance is defined by a statute in Florida Statute Chapter 768, which actually is only put up by cities and by some streetlight providers can be utility companies. Well, what happened in the state of Florida is if streetlights were put up by, and actually all around the nation, if streetlights were put up, but then they were taken down and you had a child waiting at a bus stop, or you had some bad incident occurring there, a mugging, where a streetlight would previously existed, people didn't go after necessarily the mugger. They went after the city or the utility company to sue them because they no longer had that light up there. So it became an actual many times a lawsuit, and it went all the way to Florida Supreme Court, where Florida Power and Light was getting sued because they took one down. It could have been at the request of the property owner. And because they took it down, all of a sudden there's a lawsuit. So we have some lights that are out in our right-of-way and that are street lights where we can't get FP&L to do anything. This is one where they said they would do something if there's an ordinance to protect them. And we said, fine. You know, here, if we have a light glare, we have a light problem, we can ask FP&L by having this ordinance to either fix the problem or remove the problem. Right now, this is for the residential. It'll be transferred, like I said, the next time we do changes to our light standards ordinance, and it's kind of interesting because we did Chapter 3 changes to street lights first or for lighting, first in that, and then we added those lighting components to this part. We will take it over to that ordinance. I don't want to just do an amendment because it does cost money to advertise until I have an ordinance ready, and then we'll take care of it then. So that's the other big change. So those are pretty much the changes. I did put the full ordinance out here, so there's a couple little times where I refer to, let's say, landowner or person, try to add consistency because while drafting the ordinance, it came in at different times and different drafters, including me, use different terms for the same thing, so trying to get some more consistency. You mentioned, Mr. Mills, that you also had a question as to the last time we amended it, when we added the size of inches for identification of street numbers.
Yes, I investigated that in my community.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that we require 3 inches. There were very few people who have 3-inch high letters. Most of them have 2 and some have less. But it's my feeling, by going around and investigating that, the size of the numbers or identifying them is unimportant. If you have an emergency responder coming to a street, he sees a number on the, you don't need to see it 100 or 150 yards away. He sees the one that's closest to him, he knows which direction to go, and he knows how far he has to go by watching the numbers progress. So I would suggest that the placement of street numbers, that in section 10, the whole paragraph B be eliminated.
What page is that?
On page 10.
Page 10 of 17.
So on page 10, on section 10, there's an exception, and this was actually, we require that all buildings have building numbers.
Right.
We do have, and this section is actually, section 10 is for, I call it the Bonita Bay exception, Pelican Landing exception, because what happened was the requirement was that your building have the number.
Right.
This is if you're not able to see the building with the number. This section only comes forward in that case. If you're able to see on the unit, you know, whether it's a family, a mobile home unit, or whether it's a house, if you're able to see on that structure the number, you don't apply number B. But if the house, because of deed restrictions, does not have the number on the house, and you can't see it, we require it to be on the mailbox. And that's the only time 10B comes into effect.
That's fine, and the only feeling that I got into this, by requiring 3 inches high, we put an awful lot of people at odds with the code.
The only time it is necessary is where deed restrictions in a community preclude people from following A. So if you can't see the numbers on the house, you need to see the numbers somewhere. And so that's where it's allowed on a street sign or on the mailbox.
My intention here wasn't to eliminate B. My intention was that 3 inches high is too restrictive and puts people at odds with the code.
This is a requirement that was given to me from the fire marshal. I don't
That's where I
have the
was
fire
thinking it
marshal
came
here
from.
today, and I'm not comfortable making a change
There's,
to it.
this,
Now-
this wasn't our regulation, that, like Audrey said.
Okay,
There's
but
certain things in the life
my-
safety code that
My
are.
intention wasn't to be pointing the finger. Right?
That's
My-
okay.
My
It-
intention
No.
was driving up and down the street to see what it was with the tape measure, and measuring a lot of these things, and pretty soon you get pretty adept at saying that's 3 inches and that's 2 inches in business.
Yeah.
And the 2 inches you can see, identify absolutely fine.
Yeah, I think 3 inches is too high too. Bob.
And
Now,
and
you would
and
go to,
And I felt like we make all these people code violators.
if we go to C, and you're set back more than 50 feet, it says they gotta be 6 inches tall. Now, does that mean if you don't have a mailbox
If
with it on there?
Right.
Okay, it doesn't say that.
Now, I'll give an example. Okay, that shall be it.
For this section with the numbers, would you like us to talk to the fire district to see if these are still their regulations and exactly what they
Yeah,
are, so we can
let's
present
get
that
a-
back? Because we can go back and forth on this, and to be honest with you, I don't know exactly what the life safety code says.
As
Yeah.
a person who runs around delivering flowers, the bigger the number, better it is.
I would
I
suggest,
recall this conversation when we did this ordinance last time.
I would
One of the developments in Pelican Landing only has them on the front of the mailbox. So
That
that
was an
means
issue. Right.
you have
They're
to
like
get
an
by
inch.
the building before you see where you're going to go, and then you have to back up. Of course,
Right.
there's 6 guys back behind you. So I
That's-
think the bigger the number, the better. But I'm also in agreement that whatever the fire code requires, that we would be.
We can
or
bring
we
that
can
back.
issue glasses to the fire department.
Great.
I have
you
I have one
wanna
quick
go there.
I have one
Yeah,
quick
thanks.
question from Audrey that in your designation of streetlights in item 3, this paragraph, as you explained it to me, only applies to government streetlights.
That's right.
Okay.
When I say government, government or utility. So in this jurisdiction, it's going to be FP&L. FP&L puts up streetlights for people.
Yes. And
Okay.
I have one that's wonderful.
And actually, my neighbors have one where I get the glare, and the fact that I have not shot it out, I am. My husband likes it. I do not like it. There was a period of time where I actually reoriented things in my bedroom, but I actually for a while had a piece of tinfoil patched where the sun, when the lights would hit me, when I was sleeping, it was like Chinese water torture. I felt I could read by that light. And of course we wanted it on the street part. I did not like it where it was. So instead of shielding the light, I shielded, the area so where I was sleeping was fine and everywhere else was lit up. And that was fine with me.
But someplace else in the code, we have
It might be TMI.
the situation where we had a loading dock at a grocery store that the light shined into the neighbors. It's covered someplace else. It's not.
Yes, sir. That's
Yeah,
going to
it's
be
not
in
reflected
your
there. Okay.
chapter 3.
I'm good with everything.
Let me go back, Audrey, to page 10 of 17, the top one. It actually continues on from section 9 there. Accumulation of dry vegetation, weeds, grass, uncultivated, and invasive exotics. Now, do I take that to mean that if you own vacant property or any property, and you have Brazilian peppers on it, for one example, that you have to remove those?
Only if they fall within the other issues there. So you'd have to remove the Brazilian pepper if code enforcement came out there and was able to articulate that they threaten the health, safety, or economic welfare
Okay.
of a bug. So if you had rats coming out of it, you bet.
No, I mean, I've been chopping these things down for years, and I'll tell you what, if you don't rip them out of the ground, boy, they come right back with a vengeance.
And you have to be very careful what you use on them because some things will allow them to seed up better.
Fire does a great
Yeah,
job.
fire is not a friend to some exotic invasive.
Okay,
removal.
I was looking at that and I'm thinking, geez, I gotta go check that property on Stark Lane.
So the condition it must meet is A through E for
Right.
you to address the problem.
Okay.
Any one of
Anyone.
those.
Okay,
Anyone, not all.
Right, so
but-
if it's over, right, it might not be creating rats, but
Right.
if it's overhanging into your neighbor and causing
Right.
your neighbor,
had that too. Fix that part too.
yeah,
Ready for an ordinance?
and that happens.
I have a question on page 12. It's C4. Dock lights, it appears that you're only talking about snook lights, but what about other kinds of dock lights? The ones there for safety and so forth, security.
And again, as long as they don't create a navigational hazard, if you're having them for safety or reflective,
What you're really talking about is the dark skies ordinance.
What?
Is it the dark skies ordinance? So
Yeah.
you exclude snook lights simply because of how they're oriented and what their intention
Right.
is. But if you're wanting to install additional lights, those would need to meet the intentions of that dark skies ordinance, being
Yeah.
shielded and
So if you have
covered.
a walkway that takes you to 20, 30 boats, most marinas have something on the
That's not going to
railing.
be a single family.
If it's
Hopefully
your
not.
dock and you have lighting on it, you're going to want it that's shielded,
Right.
so that it's just not shining up. You can have the lights.
Okay.
It's just how they're oriented.
Right.
Shines down on
low
the
lighting,
plane.
Yes, sir.
right, so
Yeah.
similar like on an airplane, you have lights to be able to see, just so that it doesn't diminish your neighbor's ability to see the stars.
And it's not blinding you at the same time.
Right.
Okay. Rex?
Are we ready for a motion to? for
Yeah,
this?
we don't have too many concerns. I think everything else is good.
I addressed all your concerns.
Seems to be.
And this is going to its final hearing on December 19th. This is a review for consistency with the comp plan.
So we
Let's
need
see
a
if I
motion
have-
to
Let's
move
see if I
this?
have another question. I thought I'd mark this thing up
Okay.
with,
You got circles back there.
yeah, I just
Page.
put that there, but there was one in the, keeping the property clean. I guess it was, maybe it was in this one here, which is something different, this one
Okay.
here. Talking about keeping up the sidewalk and so forth on your property.
Yeah, I don't think that's in
That's
this
not
one.
here, okay.
No.
So that's in the maintenance one.
Well,
All
this
right.
is the maintenance
I
one.
would make a motion that we approve the C classification here, ordinance, pods ordinance, and send it on.
I'll second it.
Third.
Motion is second. Any further discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So moved.
Thank you. We have one more ordinance today.
Uh-huh.
And this one, I'm going to apologize because I do not have a revised document, so it might be easier to read, but I need to let you know what council did to it. And that's the color palette. I'm going to let Sam Vincent do color scheming for me. Thank you. So, or Don Colapietro, who has his colors there. The ordinance is black and white. And Sam Vincent and I worked on the ordinance. This kind of unusual in this situation, but does happen. I am removing, if you go to page 11,
Wait a minute, I haven't found which?
Removing what?
okay, let me go through the presentation then after.
What number is it?
Page 11, oh, this is the color palettes. It's, the green sheet number would be 12-12-370, I think.
Yep.
Okay, got it. This
All
one.
right. And what I did two things here in my method for madness. Incidentally, this ordinance is not scheduled for public hearings until January 16th for the first reading and February 6th. So we have some time on this one, so I'm not as hopefully crazy on it.
That's on page 11?
On page 11, what I did on the ordinance before we started is I put all of the old 41 redevelopment overlay. So if you did want changes, and I wrote the title block very generous. So if you did have other amendments, I could make some amendments in there, at this time. So while we had it as a work in progress, if you go to page 11, you'll see an area in a square. Council told me to remove it.
The area in a square?
The area in a square, number E.
Down at the
I have
bottom.
that, it's here. There you go.
Okay, council says no. Council wants it so that it's new development, so any redevelopment. But as far as existing structures, they'll allow it to come in when the time comes in. Okay?
Okay.
So it's a departure from,
Right, so no one has to change.
Correct.
Within a year, 2 years, or 5 years.
Correct. So E is being removed in its entirely? Yeah. F, the language will read, the city may adopt an incentive plan for property owners to paint the entire exterior of their building by ad code, and then the rest is deleted. And we're taking out the Miami Springs language. And then enforcement, because there shouldn't be an enforcement issue. They either get their development order and follow it, or they don't. So G can be removed in its entirety. So unlike the dumpsters, where we did require them to come into a time at a certain time. City council did not think for coloring. They felt that by doing the voluntary incentive program, that would bring people to incentivize, as well as trying to do, I'm losing it here, trying to have the new buildings come in. And then finally, another thing that was added, I'm not sure, Mr. Vincent and I talked about it, council. We did not want the use of the color palette to discourage placement of murals. So, for example, Mr. Sims on his property has ice cream cones. He will not have to paint over his ice cream cones. Okay. Hey,
Ready for discussion?
Oh,
now you're ready for discussion.
One of the things that is a problem is that we progressed on this before we actually had the physical colors available to us. And while I respect Sam's ability, in his color selection, I find that it's very fine for residential use. They make very beautiful residential homes, but I find that in the commercial aspect, at least in my very meager experience, my building would not comply. And so I brought this to my designers, and they made a statement, something like it was picked out by 6 grumpy old men, and I didn't know if I'm grumpy or not. But anyhow, the problem that my designers had is that if you pick out a basic color, for example, the blue, dockside blue down here, then you are bound to the accessory colors, and that is Blawsville. So I think that this could be adopted for residential use and be very effective and be very beautiful. But I think in the commercial aspect of it, I think we need a little bit broader palette to work with, and not be so limited into the accessory colors.
And that was something City Council actually discussed at quite length. I think Mr. Vincent or Mr. Dolmer is in a better condition than I am as far as explaining colors. I do need to point out Exhibit 4, which is page 25 of the ordinance, has all the actual sets that are contained within the color palette for coastal colors for southern shores and beaches.
That's this one, yes.
Right, so I have it in words as opposed to, I can't.
Well,
put
one of the things that we looked at in the same Sherman-Williams, if you get their little color thing, we had a lengthy discussion about this, and we thought that it would be appropriate if we picked out a color, and then the homeowner or the building owner had the discretion of going one step on either side of that, and it would give them some options, and then not limited the accessory colors, because that's the thing that makes your property distinctive.
Yeah.
Mr. Sims, I don't want to get into the science of color because I've learned in 2 conversations with Mr. Vincent that I know nothing about it.
Yes.
But what brought this about is the current description that you have in the Land Development Code simply states South Florida colors. There's a lot of colors that can be considered South Florida colors. And as a result, within that large number of colors, there are some that you like, and there's some that you wouldn't want to see down there. And the problem is there's no consistency. It's a matter of personal opinion as to what looks good. I may paint my house a color that you find offensive, but I find tasteful. As a result of that, it's much easier to have specifics so that when an architectural plan is submitted, there is a specific list that says, yes, you are consistent with this list, or no, you are not consistent with this list. So we moved this particular palette forward, and one of the reasons was that it was non-offensive. It was simple. But the intent is not to leave it as is. The more I've immersed myself in the study of color, more I realize that we do need to look at continued modifications of this so that what works for a business in terms of attraction, being able to be noticed, also works with what we're looking at in terms of architectural style and a theme for the entire corridor. So what you're looking at today, I mean, I won't call it a first shot at a color palette, but it is at putting in place a standard so that while we're looking at advancing this color palette and coming up with something that is maybe a little more sophisticated and something that does provide maybe a few more options, there is something in place that prevents, bottom line, phone calls from coming to our office of residents complaining about bright colors on buildings. So what you're looking at today is something that establishes at least a situation where what goes in down there is not going to be offensive. It may not have the same focus or create the same impact that another color would, but we are working towards that goal of establishing a palette that meets both the concerns the city has for that corridor and also the business owner's desire for being noticed.
I realize you have to have something that is enforceable, that you can carry in your hand and say this meets or this does not meet. One of the things that I see now is that, for example, the fire station, which is a relatively new building, is not on this color chart. So as it was originally presented, everybody had to repaint within 2 years, and so would the fire station have to repaint? You
Under
know?
the previous
So
regulations,
these are, I think we're kind of on a slippery slope here that we need to be
And
careful with.
council recognized that and changed it because of that.
Yeah, all right. The other thing that that we discussed about it is we're back to the canopies. You know, certain business. I look on Old 41 right there, and I say, okay, the Circle K has this red Circle K and the banding, and they have it all over the United States, and this would eliminate that in essence. And so I'm saying, is this the avenue we want to pursue? I understand what we're trying to do is to eliminate the gaudy carnival appearance and have some rhyme and reason to this thing, yet we've got to have some individuality in.
Well, in this, we are not unique in that aspect. And sometime in the early 90s, what you found was a lot of corporate designs that people wanted to, or companies wanted to build throughout the United States. Didn't matter what portion of the country you're in. If you went to a Best Buy, it looked like a Best Buy. And those designs became very protected by those companies. As time went on and there was almost a pushback to, I'll call it a big box design or corporate design, they started to come up with different alternatives for how they could, one, be recognizable, and two, work with communities where they were doing business so that they could have something that was a little unique. So coming up with standards that kind of prevent that one size fits all design is not unique to Bonita Springs, and actually I think it adds to the character of that downtown, because you don't want one after another corporate designs taking up that corridor. What you're wanting is something that goes along with your vision. This is Bonita Springs. They should look like Bonita Springs, not like Topeka, Kansas. And this works towards that goal.
Rex, if I can, two things came about. The reason that we looked at these colors are a standard. One, the council wanted to have certain colors down there. And secondly, as city architect, I was reviewing projects, and I was asked to make a determination on colors for new buildings. And there was nothing written that I could fall back on. So I was the determinant of what colors would be. And it started getting very complex. The new corporate colors today, even local, they were getting very diverse, and everyone was trying to outdo the other with bold, primary, gaudy colors, to put it bluntly. And so I said, I need to have something here that reflected what the city of Bonita Springs was, really what John is addressing here. And the council could take a look at that and see if this color palette, for example, was the kind of image that they wanted to portray. Now, I think what's going to happen is that there's going to be some wavering here between a color or two and a trim color, an accent color that will happen as it regards corporate colors. Now, local owners and business people that want certain colors that are quite gaudy, and there are some people down on Old 41 that do, and they do for various reasons, and they fall back on the marketing excuse that for me to be seen, I need to be loud and bold, more bold than my neighbor. Mm-hmm. And so the council was feeling like, that's not the direction that the downtown needs to take. So these colors came about to try and find something in there that was not loud and gaudy and you could work with. And I think you can work with a number of colors. Now, to range one side or the other on that color strip is probably going to be allowable if you're not getting too far away. The palette restricts, I think there may be 25 or so colors for the body of the building, and it restricts you to a palette that is acceptable to many, many people in coastal towns. That's the body of the building. Accents, those accents were developed, and they're developed by different companies, Pittsburgh Paints and Sherwin-Williams. They all have their combinations that go together. Now, they pay upwards of $25,000 to $100,000 to determine which colors are accents and which are trim. So that was nice and easy to say, okay, someone paid to study this, and this is what they came up with. Now, we have a body of colors now that get you away from probably 10,000 or 20,000 different colors. For me to look at that many and choosing whether or not that could be appropriate on a building is just too much. So I think that you're saying that we've brought it down to a smaller list, and there could be some discussion here with council to say, okay, we need to deviate a little bit from this palette. And I'm open to that if they want to do that, but they didn't seem to indicate that at the meeting that we had.
And I don't want to put words in Mr. Vincent's mouth, but I almost look at this as a work in progress. This is your first step, but I don't look at this as being the ultimate.
I don't know if council approved it. Marjorie?
Council gave permission to advertise as far as approving the color palette?
Mm-hmm.
No, they approved it.
Okay.
And let me point out, when they approved it, they made it very clear that it would be subject to change. There might be additional colors added as time goes by or taken out.
Okay.
So this is a done deal already.
They had a workshop. I think I have that in
The
there.
only reason I'm looking at this thing, and I went and got the last copy they had. I just had to see what it looked like, and in their speech part of this little thing where it's describes the colors, it says that the style can range from a beachfront hideaway in the Carolina Lowcountry to a grand historic plantation in Mississippi. We happen to be in Southwest Florida. I don't know that, and like Rex said, I think that's probably a fine setup for residential areas, but I just don't know that it works
It's not a
on
perfect
Old 41.
thing.
No, it's not.
But I will, and I'm not going to disagree on that. They have what they call paint colors by collection, and they have exterior color schemes that you can choose. This is the one that you would choose in this kind of given area, and I believe that's why at
Yes.
the workshop it was selected as opposed to other color schemes, which are like suburban modern,
When was the
desert and
workshop?
southwest. What?
When did they have a workshop?
You were there, November 13th. You popped in. I thought you popped in.
It was for Old 41, and this was one of the items that was.
There's no yellow on here, and the architect contractor is yellow, and the vet next door to me is yellow. and I think they're acceptable for the Old 41 area, and so we're limiting landowners' choices here to manifest his personality. That's a nice.
You are.
Hey, that's pretty good.
That's a nice,
Geez, that's a $10 word.
And the thing that worries me about this, once it gets passed and gets into law, somebody starts enforcing it, and I don't think it's ready yet.
Well, and what I would say to that, quite frankly, because we could go to every color in the rainbow and find where it might make sense on one building and not sense. And same thing with the trim issue, is with the administrative appeals provision, you have direct access to counsel. So if Mr. Vincent, if it's outside of Mr. Vincent's review authority, you know, as a reviewer and outside of community development, you can expedite an appeal to city council, show the plans, especially if the appeal says Mr. Vincent doesn't object, it just is outside of his discretionary authority. Council can make that decision to go with that yellow or to go with that chartreuse. I don't know about chartreuse. I'm just saying color names.
Well, a perfect
don't know
example
what it
right now, and there's a lot of conversation about it, is the building that was just painted multiple colors next to the Hess station.
Yes.
Now, as city architect, I was asked to take a look at that and approve the colors. Now, there's nothing written, and when I talk with the owners, you know, what kind of discussion would you suggest that I have?
Well,
and that is beginning. There are several other owners that I've had discussions about color with them, and they're in total disagreement. And so what was happening, it was falling back on me to make a decision.
I understand.
And the council, I found out at that time, said, no, we have our own opinions about color as well. So I thought it was a time that we try to bring this thing closer together here. And again, I think Audrey's correct, is that I studied many different communities to come up with these colors, and there were quite a few that were similar, but there were quite a few that had, maybe 10,000 different colors that could be approved. And that was quite daunting.
Mr. Chairman.
And I agree with you, Sam, that we're looking at worst case scenarios, and we're trying to do something for the worst case scenario. But in doing that, we're also penalizing everybody else. And so I hate to see this go forward based on just this selection right here. I don't know how you do this, but I hate to see this get written into an ordinance and it be based just on these colors alone, unless we would want to say these colors would only apply basically to residential, and then we're kind of defeating our purpose. So we're...
Well, you know, I think that after talking with a lot of people about this and looking at the palettes, what I'm finding is that people want to go along with the palette as long as it includes their color.
Well, that's exactly. I am guilty. Yes, I am.
Not in
And that's individualism, and so you're cutting into, the next would be architecturally. Can I put a porch on? Well, we say no. Well, that is cutting into individual design abilities and so forth, and I don't know where you cut that off. I think narrowing a palette is fine, whether or not it's this one.
Oh, you're exactly right. Narrowing it down to get rid of the extremes on one end or another is exactly what we want to do, but I think that this is too narrow for the broad scope of Old 41, and so I would hate to have this move forward based on just this alone. I think it has to have a bit broader scale.
Can I make a couple points? Number one, I understand where Sam's coming from, and I agree with him in principle. The two or three comments I would offer is that maybe there needs to be some process where if, say, Rex wants to repaint his place and he wants to use a color that's not quite on that chart, but he and his designer feel that it will work, maybe there's an intermediate step, whereas, now, first of all, do not go by paint chips. Do not look at paint chips inside a room because the lighting will not look the same as it looks out in the sun. But property owner could, at his expense, go and get a quart of like that trim color that Rex would like to use made up, and he's painted a good bit of his building with the field color and all that, and he has maybe 10 foot of this accent put up. Mr. Vincent can go and look at that, and if he doesn't agree with it, then they could still appeal it, but that would be an intermediate process. It would make it easier for a property owner to work. That second question I would ask is, the way I'm reading this applies to Old 41.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
There's just as many bad paint schemes in the rest of
Yes,
that you have to look at.
we don't disagree with that, but this is for the Old 41.
I understand that, but I'm just saying.
Would the inclusion of language that would almost allow additional colors to be added to the palette be acceptable? Because that would address some of what you were saying with the existing buildings that have colors.
Say that again, John?
Well, I think
If there was a
Wait,
pro-
hold on.
If there was a process that would allow applicants to include additional colors within our accepted palette.
Something like a relief valve, I mean, we already have that, so if there's a color that is beyond approval, but he agrees to, we can take it to the next council meeting?
Well, here, my color that I have does not meet this.
Okay.
And so the thing that kind of bothers me, if I want to repaint the building the same color that it is, and I won an award for beautification, so I guess it approved of somebody.
Yeah.
But if I wanted to repaint it, then I got to come to the council and get approval to repaint my building? No.
We've said council, it doesn't have to necessarily be a hearing process. It could be, we could set something up administratively with a council appeal.
Especially if there's no objection.
Yeah, but I think that there
Well,
is a mechanism that we can
It's
create.
just another hoop that
I
all
think
of us have
I
to
think
jump
you
through.
see though what the problem can be because
Oh, yeah, I see your
there
problem.
there are millions of colors
The
and
mess up the street is there, and
that was my first point to the council was that you can do nothing and let everyone choose whatever color they want, but that's not what they wanted to
we
do.
need to have some easily enforceable ordinance, and yet we have to have some flexibility.
Well, and I agree with the statement that there are literally tens of thousands of colors out there. I mean, I painted motorhomes and cars for years, so when you're going through a book that's this thick, it has little tiny chips in it, there's a lot of colors. And I don't know if it's even possible, but it would seem to me it would be simpler if we had like primary colors that were just for example, a bright yellow, a bright red, a high gloss black, a bright blue, whatever, go down the list, but a much smaller accounting or list of these colors and showing of them, and say that, okay, you can't pair the bright blue with the bright yellow. That way you could maybe do it with something else, but you can't, or the green, you can't, that's what we have on Old 41.
That's no different than what we're doing now, actually, with the palette. It's the same thing.
Yeah, but
Because it's so emotional and it's so subjective.
The length of that list would confuse anyone. And it's not that I disagree with the intent. It's just when you start putting down all of those options with what can go and what can't go, it would
I think
immediately become unusable.
John, if I could, I think the relief valve, which is what was mentioned, Rex, you may have mentioned that, is probably a thing to do, and I exercise that now anyway. In other words, you don't have the exact color there, but you're close enough to where it's not obtrusive.
So you can make a judgment call.
I can make a
And
judgment call.
if necessary, you could even ask for a little 5 or 10 feet of a strip put on the building with the other paint.
Yeah, I can do that too.
Yeah.
But if you're within this palette somewhere, it's probably a good relief valve. And like I said, I have to do that now. I don't like doing that now, particularly with the. I'm getting a lot of colors, particularly with banding and striping that the service stations and food marts come in with, and they're not compatible with other buildings, and this is around Bonita, and sometimes they get pretty atrocious, and there's no restriction against that. We just can't have 10%, more than 10% of a primary color. And what you find is primary colors are getting to be in stripes. And it's very difficult to help those owners, particularly when it's a big corporation. But I did review lots of communities that are taking a harder and tougher stance on what they call community colors. This is our image. This is who we want to be, and this color palette is to our liking. And that was what I was trying to get the council to, is that, you're talking about the image of Bonita, and you're talking about our property owners, business owners buying into that particular image. If they are, then you're okay. If there's disjointed and they're not, then you have problems, and you're bringing up some of those problems.
So
I don't think it matters which palette we would bring forward. As soon as colors are adopted, there's going to be somebody that wants to paint their building something other than those colors.
But Sam,
So-
Sam is saying there is a
Exactly.
relief now, so.
That being said, I think we can formalize what Mr. Vincent's currently doing in terms of accepting additional colors onto that palette. That way, it becomes a choice for other
Yeah,
people
on
as well.
appeal, you can appeal to me directly, and then.
Yes, sir. And then if for some reason you decide that it's not an appropriate color and they still believe that it is, then maybe in that instance you could bring that to the city council. But there'd be no reason to bring every color.
No, it wouldn't be.
Right.
Well, the ordinance, as it's going to be presented, though, my objection is, as the ordinance is presented, it specifically specifies this Southern Shores and Beaches for all buildings. And that's where I have a problem. So I have no problem with the ordinance and the control of colors and so forth, but I think, and so is there something we could do with that?
Well,
I can introduce all of their colors.
Mr. Sims, if you would like,
Wouldn't be much of a review then, would it, if you
No.
had every color out there?
this is what we have.
It's how you mix.
If you would like us to add language for the inclusion of additional colors into this palette, I'd be happy to do that. I think it's appropriate. I think it's necessary.
Once you open that door, it's hard to close it, though. And this is very, very specific as to this and this alone. And so I say, well, once you open it to something else, then you're essentially doing away with this.
I think you're too rigid in your interpretation of them. I think Sam's comments here make it workable. He takes the palette that's offered, and he offers a little bit of a rubber band to it.
I understand that, but the ordinance, it doesn't specify that with Sam. It specifies that this is what we're
Well,
going to be using.
and that's what I'm saying. We can add some additional language in there.
Yeah,
that,
I would-
that
we
softens
could add,
that.
we could change one word on page 11, where it says specifically designated as Sherwin-Williams exterior coastal colors for Southern Shores and Beaches, or paint from another manufacturer of, instead of identical, similar.
I don't think that's the change. I mean, I can change it to that, and that's fine. I think the concern that we have isn't similar colors on the palette, but if somebody has something totally different that deviates from the palette,
Yeah,
that might be a very
that
good
negates
fit.
the word similar.
I don't have a problem with the word similar. I mean, that's not the wiggle room that I think that Rex is suggesting, you know. I mean, it's
next
good lawyering,
item
Mr.
is what you're
Colpietra,
hitting
but-
on right now, is that there are 24 sets of colors. And it specifies what those 20, so once this ordinance is adopted, it's very specific that there's 24 colors in the selection.
Correct.
And so I see that once it gets into print, then it gets extremely difficult to do something else, and the landowner has to jump through a lot of hoops.
Well, actually, I think we can set it up so it's not as hoopable as stated. Now, understand, these are the colors that City Council, and City Council saw it as a starter palette. So I don't think they're deviating that
One of the
much from you.
comments the city council made that it was gonna be Blasville or something.
I caught that.
Huh?
Yeah, I caught one.
Well, I think you've got two issues with colors.
Hey, I was,
One, if it's similar but not identical. I believe that issue is addressed in the current language. Then you have a second issue, which is different colors which are not close to or similar to those within the adopted palette. That language and provision needs to be added. So,
right. And that can be added to some sentence, like any major variation in color palette may be approved by council upon recommendation by the reviewer. So it can be just a 2-week process. Is 2 weeks, I mean, especially after hearing earlier today on administrative appeals, needing 2 weeks for property owners next door, asking city council to take a look at it in under 2 weeks, is that onerous?
And the reason that it has to go to council is because the city architect wants to be taken out of that
I understand.
decision-making because the council has a color scheme that they want. So if on appeal I choose something that's not with their liking, then there's going to be something to pay by me. So I'm saying you're within this palette. If they want to change it, then it has to go to them to be changed. I mean, you're trying to get away from, I want to paint my building, but I got to go to the council because I don't fall in this palette. That may be the reality of it, because no one is there to disprove of that palette.
So it would be 2 weeks at the outside, is that what you're saying, to do that?
Yeah, unless it's on the third week or the third Wednesday, it might
Could be
be
3 weeks.
3 weeks.
Okay, I'd like to make one point, and that would be that if it does get to the point that it goes to city council to approve it, that it not necessarily mean that that's added permanently to the palette.
Right. It's on a case-by-case basis.
Right.
Yeah, it would, yeah.
There could be verbiage to the exception rule.
I'm putting it in right now. Palette may be approved by city council.
Now, I'm sure,
And it's just to allow, if it goes outside, now this is not an appeal, anything else would have to go to an appeal.
right,
What we would do is we would add to section B on page 11. Currently it reads, the reviewer is authorized to approve minor shading variations in palette colors that may be caused by the use of paint from different manufacturing companies. Any other change in palette colors may be approved by city council with the concurrence of the reviewer. So it would still be something that we architecturally agree upon.
Well, with concurrence of the reviewer, they're there because I wasn't in concurrence with them.
Well, no, they're there because it's outside of your authority.
Well,
Yeah.
you could look at it that
see
way,
what you're
yes.
saying, But I think that Mr. Vincent's wanting his opinion to be left out of it and have the city council
How
simply
about
make the
with,
determination.
Just
Am I
be
incorrect?
approved by council.
yeah, but I think they need an architect telling them what to, you don't want me picking out, as I say, chartreuse.
It's
on a
a
building.
convoluted problem. It really is.
No, and
There
it's
is
a
no end
taste.
to it.
You are judging taste.
Right.
And I would like somebody who is trained in colors to judge taste or to give guidance.
What you're going to find,
Who's
though,
making the decision?
I've got a lot of literature from consultants and experts in color, and they all are different.
Absolutely. And beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So it makes sense that somebody on staff, whether it's you as the reviewer, whether it's you as the community development director, you do not want me
Right.
to try to say, oh, look how beautiful that red is.
And the reason it comes to council is because of their vision of what they want the city to
Correct.
be. Because they have the ear of all the residents in the city. So that's the body that properly approves a color that's outside of a palette.
Okay, I'll just have it here. Any other change in palette colors may be approved by city council. So you can come to city council, we'll write up the green sheet, we'll write up the information. City council will say, oh my God, what are you thinking? Or say, I love it, go in good faith. And then staff has their marching orders.
That's important, I think, because colors that are favorable change from year to year. And in business, there is an association that deals specifically with colors that predict the colors for the next year. And retailers use this specifically, but business owners can use it as well, and it has to do with many things such as merchandising, how you merchandise, what colors you use to attract the public this year. How do you attract young people as opposed to older people? Colors are different when you do that. So this thing is very, very broad, but if the council wants to review that, they're welcome to do so in changing colors.
Yeah.
I can't
Okay.
believe they will want to.
And I'm going to put on a case-by-case basis,
Yes.
because depending on what building size or structure, a color may look fabulous on one building and look really atrocious on another.
Well, and there's another thing that kicks in, and that is since Old 41 does have buildings with murals, that mural can have a big impact on how this beautiful color scheme that's on that palette might look with it.
Right.
And the mural is there for one reason, it's merchandising.
That's right. And sometimes it can be loud and bright.
Okay, so where do we stand with this? Are we gonna,
I'd like to
I'm
make a
gonna
motion that accepts
You'll see it one more
Audrey's
time
change.
right. You'll see it again in January. I'm going to make the changes that council
Okay.
asked.
Yeah.
I think you'll see it in January. You might see it in February.
okay.
If we
Whichever.
go to the council for them to approve a color, the council's motives are not the same as Sam's, for example. The council's motives are to represent their district, and I'm wondering if that is the group that should approve it to get it off Sam's shoulders. I would rather John approve it than the council
Compliment or an
approve
insult?
it. Well, let's think about it. I'm a council member. I'm representing my district, and I'm making a paint choice for something up on Old 41.
all of your constituents like bright red and blue and green.
Yeah, well,
Well, and it's similar when you're selecting something with your spouse. I mean, you may.
several years ago,
Hell to pay.
I was out in the sun too long, and my brain got affected, and I served on the Architectural Selection Committee for Spanish Wells. And there's 5 adult men, supposedly of normal intelligence, and we're looking at a little yellow paint chip on the side of a house to see if it complies or not. And we're having this big argument over it, and I'm thinking, this is the stupidest thing I was ever involved in. And I hate to see the city get involved, the city council, which has so many important things to do, to get involved in something as stupid as making a decision on a paint chip. So I've got a lot of difficulties with this.
Well, you know, Rex, this comes out of trying to understand, just quickly here, what it is you want to be
I hear you.
as a city.
I understand the motive, but the method
The
is
method's very difficult and it's broad, and this is why so many cities now are coming down to palettes, very restrictive palettes, and they do not approve anything outside that palette. Miami Springs, they gave their people there 1 year, or it's $100 a day in a fine to comply.
Yes, you. Regardless of what you do with what's presented before you, you will not be the most restrictive community in Florida.
I hate to rush this along, but I'm gonna have to leave very shortly, and I know Henry's gotta go too, so
Would you like us to look at some options to bring back to you in January or February, whatever that date is that it comes
Please,
back, and
yeah.
we'll come back with several different
It
options.
will
for
come
the,
back here before it becomes,
They gave permission to advertise. I was going to keep it in the tracking that we have it in. Do you need it deferred?
I would prefer it.
I would too.
we're not satisfied with it
No.
as it is.
Okay. I'll let them know your actions.
Okay. So we're done there
Public comment?
with D. Yeah, we have some folks that have been very patient here. Public comment? Anybody? Sure.
You got 14
And
seconds.
I would request that if it's anything on the social services, it's not on the agenda, it is not noticed,
Okay.
not to have discussions on that, because one of the things, because we do have threatened litigation, I would like my record all to be at one location.
Okay.
So if we, I realize that we want to be courteous to people who've been here, but, at each meeting, but at the same time, it's going to create a real nightmare for me in litigation.
Okay.
If we go to litigation.
Okay, with that said,
Good morning.
morning. Yes.
Good
well,
talk
not-
anyway.
It's almost good afternoon.
My name is Conrad Schultz, and I'm a founding member of Concerned Citizens of Bonita. And I just simply wanted to come today and thank you for the efforts that you've been making all summer. Thank Audrey and thank John as well. My wife and I returned a little over a month ago, and I know that you all have been working hard on those regulations. And that's all I wanted to say. Thank you for your effort.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else? Okay. The next meeting will be set for January 10th, 2013. Same date and same time, correct? 8:30?
I move that we approve the minutes.
Boy,
Second.
jeez, I guess.
Aye.
Minutes are, we've done that. Moving right along.
I move that we adjourn.
And we have a motion
Second.
to adjourn and a second.
It's done.
Thank you all for attending today,
Right.
your patience. And we'll pick up our package of dead trees here and